The world was ice and silence. A land where storms never ended and the snow never melted. In this frozen planet, life was cruel and the people were harder than stone. They believed only the strong should live. The weak had no place among them on one terrible night. 3 children were born inside a cold cave. They were sisters, fragile and small. Their skin was pale like frozen glass, and their cries were thin against the roar of the wind. The tribe gathered around them, waiting for the elder to speak. The elder studied the newborns with sharp, cold eyes. He shook his head. His voice cut through the air. They are infertile. They will never give life. They will never give the tribe a future. The crowd gasped. To the tribe, this was a curse worse than death. The people whispered to each other. Some turned their faces away in shame. Others looked with anger. They believed the sisters would only bring bad luck. Their mother wept. She begged for mercy. She begged for her children to live. But the elder lifted his hand. His word was law. Bury them. The snow will take them back. The father did not speak. His heart was torn, but his fear of the tribe was stronger than his love. The people carried the 3 sisters outside. The storm was fierce. The snow bit their skin like knives. The ground opened in a shallow hole, and the sisters were lowered into the white grave. The snow covered their tiny bodies. Their cries grew softer and softer. Until they were almost gone, the tribe left, thinking the storm would finish what they had started. The world above was dark. Only the howl of the wind remained. But under the snow, the sisters still lived. Their breath was weak, their hearts slow, but they held on. Even in their first moments of life, they refused to surrender. Their little hands moved, scratching against the cold wall of ice around them. But the snow was heavy, and their strength was small. Time passed slowly. Each second was like an hour. Their tiny voices were fading. Silence crept closer. Death waited just beyond the cold. Then, footsteps crunched across the snow, not the heavy steps of the tribe, but different, slower, heavier. A shadow moved across the storm. A tall figure wrapped in strange clothes. His face was hidden by a mask. His body carried tools of metal. He was not one of the tribe. He was not from this planet. He was a human. The human was lost. He had been searching for shelter from the storm. His ship had crashed days ago. His supplies were running low. He had wandered across endless white. Fighting hunger and frost, he thought he would die soon. But then he heard something, a sound so small. It almost vanished in the storm, a weak cry, like the whisper of a ghost. He stopped. He listened. The sound came again, faint but real. He dropped to his knees and dug his hands into the snow. His gloves were torn. The cold burned his skin. But he kept digging. At last, his fingers touched something soft. He pulled, and a tiny arm appeared. Blue from the cold, he did not stop. He dug faster. Uncovering 3 small shapes, they were the sisters. Barely alive, their lips were blue. Their eyes closed, he pressed his ear close, and heard faint breaths. He felt their weak heartbeats. The human's chest tightened. He knew what it meant to be helpless. He could not leave them. He lifted the first child into his arms. Then the second, then the third. He held them close to his chest, his own warmth keeping them alive for another moment. The storm raged around him. But he rose to his feet. His legs shook. His body screamed with pain. But he carried the sisters back toward the light of his campfire. Behind him, the hole in the snow remained, an empty grave that had failed to claim its prey. The wind tried to bury the space, but it could not erase what had happened inside his camp. The human laid the sisters near the fire. He covered them with pieces of his own clothing. He rubbed their hands and faces. Trying to bring back life, the sisters stirred. Their eyes opened for the first time. They saw a face not like their own. A strange face with tired eyes, but those eyes were not cruel. They were full of something the sisters had never seen before. Mercy. Their small fingers reached toward him. The human held them, whispering words they could not understand. But they felt his tone. It was gentle, not harsh. The snow outside screamed and howled, but inside the small firelight. A miracle had begun. The three sisters, once cursed and left for dead, had been given a second chance. The question was not if they would live, but what their lives would mean. For the first time, hope entered their story, carried by the hands of a human stranger. And far away, in the frozen caves of the tribe, the elder felt a chill deeper than the storm. Something had survived that was never meant to live, something that would change everything. The fire burned weakly inside the human's small shelter. Its light flickered against the walls of stone and cloth. The man sat close, his arms wrapped around the three alien sisters. Their bodies were still cold, but their breathing grew stronger with every passing minute. He stared at them in silence. He had never seen beings like this before. Their skin shimmered faintly. Like frost kissed by moonlight, their features were delicate. Not human, yet strangely familiar. They were alive, but only just. And he knew they would not last long without care. The human's name was David, a traveler who had come to this planet by accident. His ship had broken in the storm, his supplies scattered across the ice. He had survived on scraps, melting snow for water, and using broken parts of his ship to build a weak shelter. He had expected death soon, but instead, fate had placed these children in his arms. David fed them drops of warm water. He tore pieces of his last food rations and pressed them gently against their lips. At first, they resisted, their small faces turning away. But hunger was stronger than fear. And soon they swallowed, their eyes opened wider. Glowing softly in the firelight, the sisters did not speak his language. Their voices were a stream of strange sounds, soft and musical, yet David could feel what they meant. Their tones carried fear, confusion, and the fragile spark of hope. He answered with calm words, his voice steady. "You are safe. I will not hurt you," even if they could not understand. They felt his promise. Hours passed, and the storm outside grew louder. Snow piled against the shelter walls. The human tightened his fire, adding broken wood and bits of plastic. He worked carefully, never leaving the sisters alone. Every few minutes, he touched their hands, making sure they were still warm. The eldest sister, though weak, pushed herself closer to him. Her eyes were sharp, watching his every move. She seemed to understand faster than the others. She touched his chest, then pointed at herself. David understood. She was asking why he had saved them. He had no answer. He looked at her, and for a moment his face softened. "Because no one deserves to die in the snow," he whispered. She could not understand the words, but she felt the weight of his voice. The youngest sister cried softly. Her tears froze against her cheeks. David pulled her close and rocked her gently. He remembered his own daughter on Earth, a child who had never lived past her first year. The memory cut into him like ice. Perhaps that was why he could not walk away from these sisters. They reminded him of the life he had lost when the storm eased for a short while. David stepped outside. The world was silent, covered in fresh white. He searched the horizon, looking for movement. He knew the tribe that buried the sisters would not forgive him for interfering. If they discovered what he had done, they would hunt him, but he was ready. He had nothing left to lose. Back inside, the sisters huddled together, their small hands gripping each other tightly. They were no longer crying. They watched the human with wide eyes, filled with a strange mix of fear and trust. The fire painted their faces with gold, and for the first time, they looked alive. David sat near them, exhaustion pulling at his body. He spoke quietly, not caring if they understood. "We will survive. Somehow, we will find a way." The middle sister leaned forward. Reaching out her hand, David placed his own hand against hers. Her skin was soft but cold. Her fingers trembled. But she did not pull away. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A fragile bridge built not by words, but by survival. The hours turned into a night that felt endless outside. The stars shone like sharp diamonds inside. A man and 3 alien sisters shared the heat of a dying fire, bound together by chance, but David knew this was only the beginning. The tribe would come. He had seen their eyes hard, merciless, unforgiving. They believed these children were cursed, and they would not rest until the curse was destroyed. He tightened the fire once more and looked at the sisters. Their breaths were steady now. Their eyes heavy with sleep, he whispered to himself, "I saved you tonight, but tomorrow the real fight begins, far away in the icy caves." The elder of the tribe stirred. His thoughts were dark. He felt a crack in the silence of fate. The infertile children had been carried away by the storm. But some part of him knew they had not died. He raised his hand to the fire and declared to the tribe, "Prepare yourselves. The snow has been broken, and the cursed ones must be erased back in the human shelter." The sisters slept in peace for the first time since birth. And David kept watch, his tired eyes fixed on the storm, ready to face whatever waited in the frozen night. The night was long, but dawn finally broke across the frozen horizon. The fire inside David's small shelter was weak, but it still gave enough warmth to keep the 3 alien sisters alive. The storm had calmed, leaving a heavy silence over the land. David sat against the wall, his body tired, his eyes half closed. He had not slept. He could not. For hours he had watched the sisters breathe, making sure none of them slipped away into the endless cold. Now, as the first light of morning crept into the shelter, he saw them stir. The eldest sister opened her eyes first. Her gaze was sharp, glowing faintly like blue crystal. She looked around, her breath fast. At first, she did not remember where she was. She pressed her small hands against the strange blanket covering her, then turned her head and saw the human. Her body froze, her heart raced. This was not her tribe, not her people. The man before her was taller, broader, with strange skin and heavy clothes. She did not know what he was. Her lips parted, and a small sound escaped. It was not a word, but a frightened cry. The middle sister woke next, her eyes, softer and rounder. Blinked at the flickering fire, she clutched her older sister's hand. And together they whispered in their alien tongue. Their words were quick and sharp. Filled with fear, the youngest stirred last. Rubbing her small face and looking around with wide, uncertain eyes, David raised his hands slowly, showing them his empty palms. His voice was calm, gentle. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." The words meant nothing to them, but his tone carried meaning. His eyes were steady, not cruel. The sisters hesitated, then stayed where they were. The eldest pointed at him, then at her sisters. Her voice rose with a question David could not understand. But he guessed what, she asked. Why? Why had he saved them? He stayed silent for a moment, then touched his chest. "David," he said slowly. Tapping his heart, he repeated it once more. "David." The middle sister tilted her head, repeating the sound in a broken, uncertain way. "Da." "Vid." Her voice was thin, but clear enough. The youngest giggled softly at the strange word. For a moment, the cold shelter felt brighter. But the eldest did not laugh. Her eyes narrowed. She pressed her hand to her chest, then shook her head slowly. She whispered words that David could not understand, yet he felt the meaning inside. She believed they were cursed, unworthy to live, David leaned forward, his voice firm. No curse. No one should be buried alive. His words were fire. Though the sisters could not know their meaning, the eldest lowered her gaze, torn between fear and something new. Hope, as the day passed. David tried to teach them simple things. He showed them how to sip warm water from a cup. He tore tiny pieces of dried food and placed them gently in their hands. The youngest laughed when the taste touched her tongue. Her smile was small, but it was the first she had ever known. The middle sister pointed at the fire. Her eyes wide with wonder, she whispered to her siblings, and they leaned closer to its glow to them. Fire had always been a tool of destruction, used by the tribe to burn away weakness. But here, in this place, it gave life slowly. Their fear of David began to fade. Curiosity grew stronger. The eldest studied his strange tools, the metal pieces from his broken ship. She touched them with cautious fingers. Amazed at their weight and smoothness, the middle sister imitated his words, trying to shape human sounds with her voice. The youngest clung to his arm whenever he moved, as if afraid he might vanish. Yet, even in this fragile piece, shadows of doubt remained. The sisters remembered the cold hands that buried them, the harsh voices that called them cursed. They carried the shame of their infertility like chains. What if this human discovered the truth? Would he cast them away too? As night returned, David worked to strengthen the shelter. He piled snow against the walls, keeping the fire's warmth inside. The sisters huddled together, whispering softly. Their eyes followed his every move. He was no longer just a rescuer. He was becoming something more, a protector. The eldest finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. She touched her chest and whispered a word. Her sisters followed, giving their own names. Though David could not understand, he repeated the sounds carefully. The sisters smiled faintly for the first time. Their names had been spoken without shame. Outside, the wind carried distant sounds. The tribe was moving, searching. Their voices echoed faintly across the snow. The sisters froze, their faces pale with fear. They knew the tribe would not rest until they were found. David placed a hand on the eldest's shoulder. His eyes were fierce, his voice low. "I won't let them take you." She did not understand the words, but she understood his tone. It was a promise. As the firelight danced on their faces, something unbreakable began to form. A fragile bond, stronger than fear, stronger than shame. The human and the three sisters were no longer strangers. They were survivors, tied together by the cruel hands of fate. And outside, beneath the endless snow and stars, danger was already moving closer. The fire glowed brighter that night. Its light painted the stone walls of the shelter. The human David sat with the three sisters. Their small bodies huddled close together. They had survived one more day. But danger was growing like a shadow outside. The sisters were weak, yet they were no longer helpless. The eldest had begun to watch David carefully. Copying his movements, she studied the way he cut pieces of wood. The way he fed the fire, she repeated the motions with her own small hands. Though clumsy, David smiled faintly, understanding that she wanted to learn. The middle sister was curious about words. She pointed at objects, waiting for David to name them. "Fire," he said, pointing at the flame. "Water," he said, holding up a small metal cup. She tried to repeat after him, her voice soft. Sometimes her words broke into giggles. Sometimes she grew frustrated and shook her head. But David was patient. The youngest was different. She cared little for learning tools or words instead. She clung to David's arm whenever he moved. Her bright eyes followed him everywhere. Her laughter filled the shelter when he made small gestures with his hands. In her heart, he was already something more than a stranger. He was safety as the sisters slowly grew stronger. David felt something change inside him. He had lost everything when his ship crashed. His hope, his future, even his past on Earth, was filled with loss. But now, as he watched the sisters eat, drink, and smile, he felt purpose return to him. He had someone to protect again. The days that followed were hard. Food was scarce. Water had to be melted from snow. The fire had to be fed constantly. Without it, death would come in minutes. David worked through exhaustion, building small traps in the snow, hoping to catch creatures for food. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed. But every bite was shared. The sisters gave back what they could. The eldest showed him how to look at the stars. She pointed at constellations unknown to him. Explaining with gestures how they could guide direction, David did not understand her words. But he understood the meaning by her knowledge. He began to travel farther without losing his way. The middle sister revealed something stranger. One night, when the fire nearly died, she placed her hands near the embers and whispered in her alien tongue. Slowly, the flames grew, not much, but enough to save them. David's eyes widened. The sisters had hidden powers, small but real. They were not curses, as their tribe had called them. They were gifts. The youngest showed courage beyond her years. When the winds howled too loudly, when the walls of the shelter shook, she would crawl into David's lap and press her small hands against his chest. She would hum in her soft alien voice. The sound was calming, even to David, who had not slept peacefully since his ship had fallen. But peace never lasted long on the frozen world. One evening, as the fire burned low, distant sounds carried through the air. David stepped outside. His breath froze instantly. His ears caught the faint cries of horns. The tribe, they were near. He rushed back inside, his heart pounding. The sisters understood without words. Their faces turned pale. Their bodies trembled. They knew the tribe was searching. Hunting, David looked at them, his jaw tight. He placed his hand on his chest and then pointed at them. His voice was steady. Family, the sisters tilted their heads. Not fully understanding the word, but they felt its power. His tone was not empty, it was a vow. The eldest reached forward and placed her hand against his. The middle followed, and then the youngest. Their small fingers pressed against his rough skin. Together, they formed a circle. Fragile, yet unbroken, that night, the bond between them deepened. They were no longer simply the man and the rescued children. They had become something stronger, survivors bound by choice. But danger pressed closer with every passing hour. David knew they could not stay in the shelter. The tribe would find them soon. They would come with fire and weapons. They would not forgive. He had to prepare the next day. He began to gather supplies. He strapped pieces of metal from his ship into crude weapons. He built thicker walls around the shelter. He taught the sisters how to stay low, how to stay silent. He was a soldier once again. Not for himself, but for them. The sisters watched and learned. Their fear was still heavy, but hope burned inside them. They had been buried as curses, unwanted and thrown away. But now, someone fought for them. Someone believed their lives had value. Outside, the snow fell endlessly, covering footprints, covering the past. But inside the small shelter, something rare had been born, a bond of survival. And beyond the mountains, in the icy caves of the tribe, the elder raised his staff, his voice thundered. The cursed ones still breathe. The snow tells me so. Prepare your blades. We will erase them before the next moon. The storm was rising again, carrying with it the sound of war. Asterisk, the sky was heavy with gray clouds. The frozen wind carried a warning. David stood at the mouth of the shelter. His eyes scanning the horizon, the three sisters sat behind him. Silent, they could feel it too. Something dark was moving across the land. The eldest sister gripped her siblings' hands tightly. She remembered the voices of the tribe. The cold command of the elder, the snow that covered their bodies. The middle sister whispered in their alien tongue, fear trembling in her voice. The youngest hid her face against David's arm. She knew danger was near. Then the sound came, distant but sharp, a horn. Carried by the wind, David's body stiffened. His heart raced. He knew what it meant. The tribe had found them. Shapes appeared in the distance. Dark figures against the white snow, there were many, carrying spears tipped with frozen stone. Their bodies were wrapped in furs, their steps heavy and sure. The elder walked among them, his staff raised high. His voice echoed across the frozen plain. The cursed ones belong to the snow. Return them, stranger. Or be buried with them. David stepped forward. His breath fogged the air, his eyes locked on the elder. He did not understand the alien words, but he knew the meaning. The tribe wanted the sisters back. They wanted death. He shook his head firmly. His voice thundered. No, they live, and they stay with me. The tribe did not understand his language, but his defiance was clear. His stance, his raised arm, his protective body all told the story. The sisters pressed closer together. Their hearts beat fast. They had never seen anyone stand against the tribe. Never had anyone spoken for them, their eyes filled with tears. The elder slammed his staff into the snow. The ground echoed with the sound. You defy the will of the tribe. Stranger, you protect curses. You will be broken with them. The warriors stepped forward. Their spears glinting in the pale light. David lifted a shard of metal. A crude blade he had shaped from his ship's wreckage. His grip was strong, his body ready. He had fought battles before, on worlds far from this one. He had nothing left but this. He would not surrender. The eldest sister cried out, rushing to his side. She grabbed his arm and shook her head. She spoke quickly in her alien tongue, begging him not to fight. But David's eyes were steady. He touched her shoulder and whispered, family. That one word was all she needed to understand. The tribe moved closer, their circle tightening around the shelter. The snow crunched under their boots, the air grew colder. The fire behind David flickered low. The sisters trembled, their breath came fast. Then something strange happened. The middle sister stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned with light. She raised her palms and whispered. The air shimmered, and the snow at her feet began to swirl. The tribe froze in shock. Their eyes widened. The elder snarled, "See, cursed magic." They must be destroyed, but David stepped in front of the sisters. Shielding them, his voice roared across the frozen plain. If you want them, you must go through me. The warriors hesitated. For a moment, the silence was thick. The storm itself seemed to pause. The sisters clung to David, their hearts torn between terror and awe. Finally, the elder lowered his staff. His eyes burned with hate. We will not fight here. Stranger, but hear this, you cannot run from the snow. We will return with fire and blades, and when we do, no shelter will save you. The tribe pulled back slowly, their figures fading into the storm. Their horns echoed one last time, promising war. Then they were gone. Swallowed by the endless white, David stood still. His body tense, his breath heavy. The blade in his hand trembled slightly. He lowered it at last, turning back toward the sisters. They rushed into his arms, their small bodies pressed against him. Their tears wet his clothing. The eldest whispered in her tongue. Words David could not understand, but he felt their meaning. Gratitude, trust, something deeper. He stroked her hair gently, his eyes burning with resolve. He knew the truth now. The tribe would not stop. They had declared war. The sisters' survival would demand more than fire and food. It would demand escape. It would demand courage stronger than fear. That night, the fire burned bright inside the shelter. The sisters sat close, whispering softly to each other, their eyes still wide from what they had seen. For the first time, someone had stood against the tribe. For the first time, they were defended, but outside. In the frozen caves, the elder spoke to his people. His voice was thunder. The stranger has stolen what belongs to the snow. We will gather every warrior. We will burn his fire. We will bury him and the cursed ones deeper than before. The tribe cheered, their voices echoing through the ice. The storm answered, howling across the frozen plains. And in the shelter, David sharpened his blade under the flicker of firelight. His eyes cold, his jaw tight. He knew what was coming. He whispered to himself, "They will not take them, not while I breathe." The sisters watched him, their fear slowly mixing with hope for the first time. They believed they were not curses. For the first time, they felt they could survive. But the snow outside whispered a warning. The storm of battle was rising. The night after the tribe's threat was heavy with silence. David sat awake, sharpening his crude blade against stone. The three sisters slept close together near the fire, but even in their dreams, they trembled. The wind outside whispered like 1,000 voices, warning of what was coming. At dawn, David made his choice. They could not stay. The tribe would return with more warriors, stronger and merciless. The small shelter would become their grave if they remained. He gathered what little he had broken metal scraps, a few pieces of food, a burning torch. Then he turned to the sisters, his voice low. "We leave today." The eldest sister understood. Her eyes grew wide, but she nodded. She helped gather the scraps of cloth and tied them around her siblings. The middle sister clung to David's arm, whispering a soft word in her alien tongue. She feared the snow, but she trusted him. The youngest laughed nervously, her innocence hiding the storm she felt inside. They stepped into the frozen world. The cold air stabbed their lungs. Snow crunched beneath their feet. David carried the youngest on his back, while the other two held his hands. Behind them, the shelter and the faint firelight faded. Swallowed by the endless white, the land stretched in every direction like an ocean of ice. David moved fast, his eyes scanning the horizon. He remembered the warning of the elder. You cannot run from the snow, but David was determined. He would run, he would fight. He would bleed, but he would not surrender. Hours passed, the sisters grew tired. Their small legs struggled against the deep snow. David lifted them when they fell. His strength was fading. But his will pushed him forward. They crossed ridges of ice, sharp like broken glass. They moved through valleys where the wind screamed like ghosts. Each step was survival, but the tribe was not far behind. From the distance came the echo of horns, sharp and cruel. Shadows moved on the ridges, warriors hunting. Their spears flashing in the dim light, the sisters clutched David's hands tighter. Fear pressing against their hearts, David led them into a frozen canyon. The walls rose high, jagged with icicles. The air was still, too still. He stopped, listening. The ground beneath them groaned. A deep crack spread across the ice. "Move," David whispered sharply. Pulling the sisters forward, the ground behind them split open. Snow and ice fell into a dark abyss. The youngest cried out in terror. Clinging to David's neck, he pushed forward, every muscle in his body burning. At the edge of the canyon, they stopped to breathe. The sisters collapsed in the snow, their small bodies shaking. David crouched beside them, his eyes narrowed. He could hear the tribe's voices growing louder. They were closing in. The eldest looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the cold light. She placed her hand on his chest and spoke, though he did not understand the words. He understood the meaning. She was asking what now. David glanced at the narrow path ahead. It was dangerous, filled with sharp ridges and cliffs. But it was their only chance. He lifted his blade and nodded firmly. "We go forward." The sisters rose. clinging to each other, their faces pale but determined. They followed David, step by step. Suddenly, a horn sounded close, too close. Warriors appeared at the canyon's mouth. Their spears raised, their voices harsh. The elder's staff glowed in the distance. His voice carried across the ice. "There is no escape, stranger. The cursed ones return to the snow tonight." David's heart pounded. He pushed the sisters behind him, his blade ready. The eldest grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ground. The middle sister lifted her hands. Whispering words in her alien tongue, the air shimmered faintly. The youngest clung to David's side. Her small eyes fierce, the tribe charged. Their feet thundered across the frozen ground. David roared, swinging his blade. He struck the first warrior. The clash, echoing like thunder in the canyon. The eldest struck with her sharp shard, clumsy but brave. The middle sister's voice grew louder, and the snow around them began to swirl. Blinding the enemy, the tribe stumbled, their vision clouded by the storm rising from the girl's hands. David grabbed the sisters, pulling them forward. They ran. Through the blizzard of snow and wind, their bodies pressed close together, their hearts racing. The elder's voice roared behind them. Furious and sharp, "You cannot run, you will freeze. You will die." His staff slammed into the ground, and the ice cracked again. But David did not stop. He carried the youngest, pushed the others ahead, and leaped across a breaking ledge. They stumbled, they fell, but they rose again, step by step. They pushed through the canyon. The storm around them thickened, hiding their trail. The middle sister's power had grown stronger than she had ever known. Her small body shook with effort. But she held on. Finally, they burst out of the canyon. The open plain stretched before them, far in the distance. A strange glow flickered warm light. Different from the snow, David's eyes widened. Hope. He lifted the sisters and pointed, his voice hoarse. "There." "We go there," the sisters followed. Their small legs dragging, but their spirits rising. Behind them, the tribe roared in fury. The canyon echoed with their anger. But they had lost sight of their prey. The storm had swallowed the sisters and the human. That night, they found a small hollow in the ice. Hidden from the wind, David lit a small fire. The sisters collapsed beside it, exhausted, their faces pale but alive. The eldest whispered something, her eyes fixed on him. David did not know the words, but he understood. She was calling him more than a rescuer. More than a stranger, she was calling him theirs. The fire burned weakly. The storm raged outside. But in that hidden hollow, hope glowed brighter than the flames. They had escaped, for now, but the fight was far from over. The tribe would return, stronger than before. And somewhere beyond the horizon, that strange glow in the snow waited for them. Promising a new destiny, the storm passed slowly, leaving behind a world of white silence. David sat beside the fire in the hollow, his eyes heavy but alert. The sisters slept close to him, their breaths steady. Their small bodies curled together like fragile birds. They had survived the canyon, but their journey was far from over. When dawn came, the horizon glowed faintly. David lifted his head. Something shimmered far away. A soft light, unlike the frozen snow. It was warm, almost golden. His heart quickened. He knew it was no ordinary glow. It was a place, a promise, maybe even salvation. He shook the sisters awake gently. The eldest opened her sharp blue eyes first. She looked at him with a mix of fear and trust. The middle stirred next, her hands twitching as if her strange power still lingered from the night before. The youngest yawned and clung to his arm. Too tired to let go, David pointed toward the glow. His voice was low but firm. "There we go there." The sisters followed his hand, their eyes widening for the first time. They saw something beyond snow, something beyond cold. they saw hope. They began their journey again, step by step. The snow deep, but their spirits rising. David carried the youngest when her legs failed. The eldest guided them across ridges with sharp eyes. The middle whispered soft sounds to keep the fire of courage burning inside them. Together, they moved like one body. Behind them, the tribe was not far. Horns echoed faintly, carried by the wind. The elder's anger was endless. He had sworn to erase the sisters and the stranger. His warriors hunted through the ice, their spears ready. But David and the sisters pressed forward, their hearts beating with one shared rhythm. They had been cursed, abandoned, and buried. Yet they still lived, and living itself had become defiance. As they drew closer to the glow, the land changed, the snow thinned, the air grew warmer. Strange plants pushed through the ice, glowing softly like stars on the ground. The sisters gasped, their eyes wide. They had never seen such beauty. The youngest laughed, a sound clear and bright. David smiled faintly, for the first time since crashing on this world. He felt hope that survival was possible. The glow led them into a hidden valley. Protected by cliffs of crystal ice, at the center rose a tall structure. Not built by the tribe, not shaped by nature, but something ancient. Its walls shimmered with light. Pulsing like a heartbeat, the sisters froze in awe. Their alien blood stirred. They felt a connection, as if the valley itself called to them. The middle sister stepped forward first, her small hands reaching toward the glowing wall. When she touched it, the structure came alive. The valley filled with light, warm and golden. David shielded his eyes. But when he looked again, he saw the sisters standing taller. Their eyes glowed brighter, their skin shimmered. They were no longer fragile children waiting for death. They were becoming something new, something powerful. The eldest turned to him, her lips parted. She spoke his name clearly for the first time. David. The sound was soft, but steady. He froze. His heart tightened for the first time. She had spoken in his tongue before he could answer. The sound of horns broke the peace. The tribe had found them. Warriors poured into the valley, their spears raised. The elder's voice thundered. The cursed ones must return to the snow. David stepped in front of the sisters. Blade in hand, his body shook with exhaustion. But he would not fall. The sisters moved beside him, not behind. Their fear had melted in the golden light. They were ready to fight. The middle sister raised her hands. Her voice echoed. The snow around the tribe rose in a blinding storm. The eldest lifted a shard of crystal from the ground, its light burning like fire. The youngest pressed her hand against David's, her small strength flowing into him. Together, they stood. The tribe charged. But the valley itself seemed to protect the sisters. The storm grew, the crystal light burned. The ground shook, warriors stumbled. Blinded and broken, the elder fell to his knees, his staff shattering against the ice. His voice cracked. They are not curses. They are chosen. The sisters cried out together, their voices rising like song. The storm ended, silence fell. The tribe scattered. Their spears dropped, their will broken. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. The sisters were not weak, not cursed. They were destiny. David lowered his blade slowly. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. The sisters ran to him, wrapping their small arms around his waist. Their eyes shone with tears, but not of sorrow. They were alive. They were free. The valley glowed brighter. The sun rose above the cliffs, spilling golden light across the land. For the first time, warmth touched their skin. For the first time, they felt the dawn. David looked at the sisters, his voice steady but soft. No more running, no more hiding. You are safe now. The eldest nodded. The middle smiled, the youngest laughed. Together they stood beneath the rising sun, once buried beneath the snow, cursed and forgotten. The three alien sisters now walked into the light of a new world. With a human by their side, they were no longer lost children. They were a family, and their story, once meant to end in the cold, had only just begun.